Okay, so here's a few news articles that are good, clean fun. This one here, so this place is called Evil Corp. Remember, there used to be the Russian Business Network, was the Russian hackers. They've now formed a group called Evil Corp, which is the greatest. I want them to have certifications. I want to be certified evil. This would be awesome. So they formed a hacking group called Evil Corp. They stole $100 million using banking credentials. This is what, there used to be the Russian Business Network did all this like 8 years ago. Evil Corp, they're apparently imitating something from Mr. Robot. and so they're catching the 17 people in Evil Corp. This is not a joke. This is apparently for real. Evil Corp. They got caught. So that's pretty awesome. Anyway, and a student contacted me about this. Sanj gives you a master's degree, and they give you certificates at undergraduate level, which is pretty awesome because Sanj is pretty high quality training. The only thing is it's super expensive. And this guy said, is this any good? And the answer I thought was very good. He said, the point is, no, here's the word, insecurity. What people really want is experience. And if you don't have that, they'll settle for industry certifications. Education is basically worthless. And they said the only reason you would do this is so they can get education money to pay for those expensive courses, which is actually not a bad idea. So get a master's at Sanj so you can use your GI money to pay most of the cost, because the only problem with Sanj is they're too expensive. So it's actually pretty brilliant. And they went and got accredited as a college to do this. You get a real master's degree from them. It's pretty brilliant. As a matter of fact, I was asking Richard today, you know, maybe we should get our corporation accredited as a college. You could totally do that. I didn't know you could do this, but you can just take your technical training and get yourself accredited as a college and then offer degrees, and you don't have any of the nonsense. Anyway, and apparently you don't have to teach like English and stuff. You don't have to be my dad went to MIT, and he said at that time it was technical college. There's nothing but math and science and one technical writing course. And he said, at least you never had this liberal arts nonsense where they teach you all this junk that you don't care about. You just teach technical stuff. And apparently we could bring this back. I've always felt the same. I never wanted to take the stupid liberal arts stuff. You could get a degree without doing that. That would be awesome. Anyway, so it's very, so a student says, shall I go get the Sanj master's? And I said, well, the only problem is paying for it. The quality of education is pretty unimpeachable. And by the way, your master's degree just means get 8 Sanj certs. Now you have a master's degree, just what it should be, right? That's perfectly fair. So it's actually pretty brilliant. Yeah. Yeah. And it costs like $50,000 or something. I mean, Sanj stuff is really expensive. That's why the only problem with Sanj is it costs too much. It's very good stuff. So you get your boss to pay for it, or you get the GI Bill to pay for it. The only trick about Sanj is to get somebody else to pay for it. Now, the San Francisco forensic examiner came to give a talk last night that was very good. And he said, you can get it for free if you volunteer, or if you go through a program, you talk to them, because they really don't care about charging starving students. They want to charge the big corporations. So he says, if you contact them, you can like volunteer, and then you get to take a course for free or something. So there are ways to get in to dodge that huge cost. And everybody respects them. Their stuff is very good. It's very up to date. Yeah. What?
Is it volunteer to pay?
Yeah, you volunteer with Sanj, and then you help like register or something, and then they let you take a course. That's how you get paid. And then they let you in for free or for really low cost, like $500. Normally it's like $5,000 per course, and they're very good. But there are ways to sort of sneak in, and it's very much worth it. Nobody will argue with Sanj certificates. Those are greatly respected. And this is awesome. I heard about this on Steve Gibson's podcast, which, by the way, I realized I hadn't put on my website. So in case anybody doesn't know, you should totally be listening to the Security Now podcast. This is the greatest podcast in information security. It is, everybody does. It's awesome. This guy has awesome information every week. And anyway, he told me about this. I didn't even know this. CISA is a government agency, cybersecurity infrastructure agency. They just declared that the entire US government ought to have a vulnerability disclosure policy and accept bug bounty reports, basically. They're not a bug bounty payment, but they're going to set up a system. Everyone is expected to start accepting cybersecurity reports without prosecuting people or punishing them and actually fixing the problem. And that would be a huge step forward. I mean, I've been doing this for years and nobody ever wants to hear it. They don't have anybody to contact. They just ignore you completely or tell you that you're evil or something. It's government, nobody wants to hear it. And this is extremely forward thinking. They're encouraging users and administration to review this post, vulnerability disclosure together. I never heard of these guys before, but they're far more with it than any other federal agency I've come across. And this is excellent advice. I do not think it has the force of law. I don't think they're forcing people to do it, but they are making an official government statement that everyone should be doing this, which is a big step forward. And so if people actually listen to it, then it'll greatly improve the security of government infrastructure, and it'll help security researchers. And I'm not going to go through it in any detail, but here's a pen testing story in case people aren't aware of this. There was a famous case a month or two ago where people were doing physical pen tests and they called the cops and locked them up. And here's another case where someone had a normal pen test and the management got mad and blamed them, and they were in a huge mess. The management demanded that they alter the pen test report to say that they were not vulnerable and tried to like blackmail them into it and everything else. You know, people freak out. The problem with pen testing is you're fundamentally doing something that people do not want you doing. You're fundamentally telling them bad news. You've got a problem. They don't want to hear it. Instead, they want you to just shut up and go away. That's why I'm amazed how many jobs my students are getting as red teamers. Red teamers are basically annoying people doing something nobody wants done anyway. But the world is changing. People are getting used to the fact that you actually pay someone to hack into your stuff and embarrass you. That's more of a hit than I thought it was going to be. I thought that would never be popular, but it's in fact getting popular. Anyway, so we're down to the last bit of Windows artifacts. We did the first bit of it last time, and so here we are. So here's more Windows artifacts you should know about. So if you have processes running on your Windows system, and every process has many threads, the threads have to be there so that the program can continue to move forward even if one part of it is waiting for something slow, which happens a lot. And each thread has many handles. Every time you open a file, you get a file handle. That's how you refer to it, and work socket and so on. Those are the named objects in memory which are referred to gain control of something. And there are some handles that are local to your individual program, and there are other handles that are public and other programs can see them, and those are called the mutexes. And the mutexes are for inter-process communication. So if you have a variable or like a file handle to a file you're writing, and you're only going to use the file with one program, then it's fine. But if you're going to have a file that's shared by many programs, then you would like the other program to know, wait, I'm using that file. You have to wait until I'm done with it before you use it. And that's what you use a mutex for. And that's what malware does. They mark your machine with a mutex to indicate there's an instance of malware running on this machine. And now if another piece of malware from the same attacker comes in, it checks and says, oh, I already have infected this box. I better not try to infect it again. And therefore, it's a very useful indicator of compromise. So here's the handles for Zeus, from memory image of a Zeus infected machine. And this, by the way, is another awesome thing about Sanj classes. Since they don't have to be in a public environment like this, you use real malware. I remember if you took a Sanj class, they gave us Zeus. It's all your infect your machine with Zeus. Watch what happens. I said, boy, you know, I can't do stuff like that. But they don't mess around. You use real malware because you're working in a controlled virtual machine that they give you, and they're right in front of you. And there's only 6 of you, and you know it's not like where I give people homework and they go off and do it at work or something next week, which is I don't use real malware because we'd all go in jail. Anyway, so you infect it and it makes these special things, you know, TID 2004, it makes these weird mutant things, a mutant called Avira 2108. That's the handle that they made. And that's why viruses often have these funny names, because the antivirus companies will find something that it makes like this and they'll name it after that. That's why they always have stupid names. They find some string in there and that becomes the name. So Avira is a fingerprint of Zeus. And by the way, I assume they gave it that name to make it look like it was the antivirus program, Avira. They often give it a deceptive name to make people say, oh, I guess that must be okay. So here's Notepad. If you open Notepad and go into Process Explorer, you can see the handles for it. And it makes a mutant too. I don't know why it makes a mutex default with a long number. Notepad decides to make a mutex for some ungodly reason, presumably so some other program will know you're using a file in Notepad and shouldn't open it or something like that. But you know, it's just programmers decide to make a public handle for some reason. One common reason, of course, is you have a suite of products that work together, like Microsoft Office, and you want Excel to know Word is open or something because they might work together. And maybe Notepad works together with other Windows products. One fun thing about Notepad, by the way, I looked at Notepad in IDA Pro, and I found that Notepad, since about Windows 2008, has a Windows Genuine Advantage check to see if your Windows program is licensed. And I was thinking, Notepad might stop working because you're not licensed. And apparently they did build that into it, but they didn't enforce it. Or either Notepad or Calculator had that, which I thought was pretty awesome. It actually does check to see if you're legal or not. But I haven't seen any consequences, but I thought it was good, clean fun.
The
So
Notepad checks?
Yeah, you find it in IDA Pro. You map out the process. You go hold the Windows Genuine Advantage check. The routine is there, but it doesn't seem to really be used. You have Notepad or calculator. I tried one of them and I found it in there and I thought that was pretty hilarious. I imagine Notepad shutting down because you're a pirate. This is illegal Windows. And you're going to pay $800 for Windows now because you have to have Notepad. You can't get through without Notepad. This is a valuable thing. Why it's worth a lot of money to you? Notepad. This is like the guy that wrote Penguin, the Linux that runs on Windows. And he came here and gave a talk. And he said, I said, why do you want to run Linux on Penguin? He said, so you can run Gopher. And I said, Gopher? You don't mean, yes, he means Gopher. Gopher, the protocol that went extinct 25 years ago. Before there were search engines, there was this ridiculous thing called Gopher, like FTP that would go find things before there were search engines. It's so old, I never used it. It was extinct before I got in the business. And he thinks people want Gopher enough to install Linux on their Windows just to get Gopher. Anyway, it's a strange world out there. There are weird people buying weird products to do weird things. Anyway, so each project runs in a virtual address space. Every Windows process thinks it's at 400,000 in hex. And so they all have resources. They got a certain amount of RAM, a certain amount of hard disk space in the page file and so on, and it's swapping data back and forth. So the virtual address descriptor tree handles this. This is the memory process which shows you the memory space of the Windows processes. And I have learned how to do this on Linux, by the way, which is good, clean fun. There are some hilarious things horrible about Linux. I was writing an ARM exploit, and I put it on the stack and executed it, and it ran. And I said, wait a minute, the stack is executable? And I looked, and it totally is by default on Raspberry Pis. And I said, wait a minute. And I Googled people. I found people years ago saying, hey, wait a minute, what is this crap? I'm used to having you put -Z no exec stack to turn that off in compiling, but you don't have to on a Raspberry Pi. The stack is just executable. And they're like, wait a minute, what is this, 1991? What? But that's what people say about IoT. Those IoT devices are incredible crap. I mean, they really do take something from 1991 and put it on there with all the mistakes from 1991 and hope nobody will notice. Anyway, so that's why I really want to get that ARM stuff going, because IoT is like fishing in a bucket. There's so many mistakes in it. It's when making hacking great again. But anyway, so that's what this thing does. This shows how, so you can do it with this thing called VM Map. It's a tool from System Hurdles, and it will show you all the memory sections, just like you saw in, say, a debugger, like Immunity Debugger. You can open the memory map, and it shows you all the sections and tells you whether it's read, execute, or write, and all the permissions on there, just like Mona does. You know, you can see the memory map, and Windows programs are really complicated with a lot of memory sections used for different purposes. And they have a lot of dills. Here's all the dills in Notepad. It's loading all these libraries just for stinking Notepad. Like, give me a break, you know. But it needs to have languages and open windows and open files and open network sockets. And, you know, it's just amazing how many libraries you're using when you make real commercial software with all the features people expect. So all those can be malicious fake dills. They don't have signature verification or anything. So you can check for signatures in them, and some of them will have signatures, but a lot of them don't. You can look for clues that they're loading a fake dill, like there's 2 dills with the same name with different MD5 hashes on the system. That would be a pretty good clue. There's other things you can look for: network connections, loaded drivers. You'll find in memory the console command history, the text of documents that are open in RAM. The strings are there in credentials. Until recently, if you logged into anything with a browser, the password was just sitting in RAM in plain text. I did that at Hope. That was good fun. Modern browsers, since about 5 years ago, they actually no longer do that because they finally realized that's a bad idea. But a lot of things are just hanging around in RAM, and something that's in RAM on a Windows machine gets copied to the page file, and then it gets copied back into RAM again later. So when we started doing RAM forensics about 6 years ago in the lab, we did RAM forensics, and people on the machine in the lab found an email that I wrote to my sister 6 years earlier. Because there's a time in the lab, in a previous generation of hardware, when I would use the lab machines to do stuff, before I had a laptop, before there were common good laptops. And somebody imaged that machine to make the golden image, and then put that image back on the new generation of hardware. And then it took the page file and put it back in RAM. So they found stuff in RAM that I put on different hardware 6 years ago. And this is a real important issue. This is why forensic people say, be careful with RAM. If you find something in RAM, that is not evidence that this person did that recently, not in the least. God knows where it came from. Microsoft Windows is very strange. It doesn't just put stuff in the swap file because RAM is full. It randomly puts stuff in the swap file for no apparent reason, and then it randomly takes the swap file and puts it back in RAM for no apparent reason. It is beyond comprehension. But when you find something in RAM, you really have no idea how that got there. It could have got there from some really bizarre circumstances. So anyway, the page file has no intrinsic structure. The Microsoft page file is just a flat copy of RAM. It's not compressed, it's not anything. And so the RAM sections are in a map file, which is hard to find. That's why you need a tool like Volatility to actually try to reconstruct them. Now you could just search for strings and you might find strings, but if you actually want to reconstruct like a notepad document or an image or a series of command lines, you have to use a tool like Volatility, which will actually find the files that control it in RAM and figure out what it is. Why, thank you. Anyway, so that's the game. Microsoft doesn't clear the page file on shutdown because it would just be a waste of time. So the page file contains all kinds of old junk and it loads it back into RAM later at random. So anyway, so you got process injection and hooking. These are awesome attacks. Process injection is where you take a running program in RAM, you stop it, and you replace the contents and then resume it. And now it runs a different program under the same name with the same privileges. It's bloody awesome. And by the way, this just came out on Android. This is the Strandhog attack that does that. You can run a malware on Android and it can take over the process of a normal app and you will never know it happened. So you open Facebook and it's malware taking your password and everything from that. It's bloody awesome. And there's no defense. Google is known for 4 years and never patched it. So I don't have a proof of concept yet, but hopefully by the time I have a mobile device hacking class next semester, I'll have a demonstration of Strandhog and we can use it. Strandhog is like awesome. You can totally just steal everything off Android phones and there's no defense. Bloody wonderful. Anyway, so this is an in-memory attack. Then there's injected processes. You know, the process continues thinking it's running whatever it originally was, but it's now running some different code. So you can do this with APIs. There are API calls to pause a process, API calls to write new memory on top of it, API calls to resume it. You're not doing an exploit, you're just using Windows as designed. So that's bloody awesome. That's process replacement. You suspend it, then overwrite the process, unsuspend it, and now it's doing something different. Redline can actually detect this, supposedly. You can detect that things have been injected. There is this Mandia product called Redline, which is discussed in the book, and I tried for years to put it in projects, and it is just crap. It takes like 4 hours to run, and then it doesn't find anything. It's ridiculous. I don't know how they can sell it. It's a free product. Mandia says this thing is useful for instant response. Well, I could not find any value in it whatsoever, so I never wrote it. But anyway, this is the only thing Redline ever did. It did detect a injection attack when I tested it on system. But it was so useless I didn't put it in the project yet because they're writing your own script in like Bash or DOS is far more effective at finding out what's going on. Anyway, so you'll find memory sections with execute, read, and write. That violates the Microsoft security model. Like I said, that is the case with Raspberry Pis. The stack has got read, write, and execute turned on, and that is insane. Since about 1998, we've all learned to never do that. The Microsoft model is W or X. Every memory section is either writable or executable, but never both. So you cannot inject code and then run it. And malware, of course, does that, and that's a clue. That should never happen with any legitimate software, that all those permissions are on the same memory segment. And of course, you can take processes and look at the MD5 hash and then compare it to the disk file, and they should match. And if they don't, then that means somebody's been doing something fishy, which is why self-modifying code is also prohibited, because it would foul up all these detection routines. And I was writing self-modifying malware for ARM, which should work, except my emulator keeps crashing. But that's another thing. It's another reason why you don't have write and execute at the same time. You're not supposed to have self-modifying code because it's too hard to maintain and secure. If you have self-modifying code, then you couldn't compare the running version to the disk version because the running version would modify itself, and that's too insane for anybody to put up with, so they no longer permit that. In principle, the processor can do it, and of course you can make things smaller and faster and more fun that way, but you lose all ability to secure it, and so it is not used by any commercial product. Anyway, so you got having a persistent mechanism, so you got to put in some kind of automatic launcher, like auto run keys or something, so that it'll automatically relaunch the malware on reboot. You can use hooking. which will just add more processes that happen when events happen, like key presses or network traffic. And Microsoft has a bunch of ways to do that by design. So you can have some kind of special keyboard or something, or special listening process for a magic keystroke that will launch something. So it's perfectly legitimate for all these normal programs to have hooks where they ask, wait, before you open that file, let me scan it. Before you process that keystroke, let me check to see if that's the hotkey to do something else. You know, it's handy for bad guys too, but of course it's there for the good guys. So rootkits hide things, keyloggers use it to pick up the key presses, and you can use various ways to do it. So you can mess with the import address table so that the particular executable now calls the wrong function when it thinks it's calling a Windows function. That's one way to do it, but that's pretty easy to catch. You can go to the interrupt descriptor table or the SSDT, which we saw in doing hooking in some of the projects, where you can just redirect all system calls to a Windows function to go to a malicious function instead. That's how the older generation of rootkits worked, kernel mode rootkits. And now they have kernel patch protection, which makes that much more difficult. And Zeus has API hooks as a volatility plugin to detect this on a system infected with Zeus, and you will see HTTP send request now goes to the wrong place. So here they have the victim module is win-inet. The function is HTTP send request, and it detected that no longer goes to a legitimate kernel process, but to another process. So this Zeus is from a generation like the project I had, I think, Firewall, a common firewall, old version did this. A lot of products work this way by hooking Windows processes. It's a dangerous and unsanitary technique, but it was used up until about 2010 by a lot of Windows software, bad and good. So to analyze your tool, you can get the tool, the RAM, with any of a variety of tools, and then you can analyze it with things like memorize, redline, or volatility. Volatility is the most famous one. It's a Python script. It's built in Kali that analyzes it. The problem is it has to know exactly which version of Windows you have, including the service pack. And as far as I can tell, it has not been updated for modern versions of Windows. The most modern images I could find were for Server 2012, which is pretty rude. And yet people are still using it, so I don't quite get it. I couldn't find a 2016 image, so I didn't put it in the projects yet. But volatility is to catch me out. It will totally parse your RAM and let you see the processes, the network connections, the notepad files, the command lines, all the good stuff is right there. If you use a version of Windows where you have to have an image of all the mapping for the exact version of Windows you're using. So anyway, let's take a look at some cahoots. 12C2 should be here. Let's get rid of this nonsense and this nonsense. And oh, I guess I need to figure out how to turn in my power too. Anyway, so here's my cahoots. There's my favorites, and 12C2 should be an option here. 152.12. C1 is 12B1. Well, my brilliant system doesn't seem to be working. Perhaps I nuked it. 12C. There's 12C3. We're going to need that in a minute. And 12C2 should be, there it is, 12C2. Okay, good. Since I didn't pay, they don't let me use folders. So, all right. 12C. I still don't have 12C2. What's that?
You hit the star right under it.
12C3. There's no 12C2.
On the last page.
Right. So it was there, and I somehow failed. All right. Where's 12C2? I'm losing my mind. 12C2. I must have checked 12C3. 12C2. Let's just run it from here. Fine. Okay. There. Oh, not that way. How do you run anything on this stupid thing? 12C2. There's 12C2 here. Now I feel a little better. Okay, good. All right. So I'm going to start this thing. Now I'm going to go around and plug in my power, without which bad things will happen. There we go. All right. pretty good music.
I like this one better than my normal one.
Yeah. There's one that has like sour notes in it, but this one is pretty good. Yeah. Okay, so we got some people. We have to wait a few more seconds to see if we got any more. Unlimited power, that's a good sign. Super male, that might be Ron Jeremy, I'm not sure. All right. All right. I guess this is it. Let's carry on with this. Okay, so. There you go. You can totally do that. All right. So the kernel data structure shows how memory is used. The VID, I think it's the volume address descriptor or something like that. That's the table that keeps those memory sections. In Linux, it's just under the proc folder. Proc, process name, and then like map or something. Shows all the memory sections used by a process. All right, which item is used by malware to prevent reinfection? Okay, those are mutants. All right. Mutants and mutexes, there's some difference, I forget. They're very similar things. I think one is in the user land and one's in kernel land or something, but they're very similar things. All right. Which one often includes malware signatures, even when there's no malware in a system? Right. This is like what happened to you with your Spunk. All right, the page file contains stuff that used to be in RAM, which might have malware signatures in it, even if the malware is no longer there. All right. And which technique is most likely to be malicious? Right, process injection is an evil thing, not a normal thing. All right, so we've got unlimited power. We'll have to come out of the closet if they want their points. Okay, I can guess that would be Carla. And unlimited power ought to be Caitlin, although I don't know if it is. Is that you? Well, good. You're the one voted most likely to have unlimited power. All right. So anyway, all right. Let me knock the music away. All right. So, all right. So other ways to persist, these things are called auto start extensibility hooks, and there's dozens of them. So there's a startup folder. You can put a program or shortcut in, and it will just run every time you restart. That is like gentlest, simplest way. There are tasks you can put in task scheduler to happen at periodic times or after every reboot or after somebody logs in or so on. You could modify some of the system binaries. Remember, there's about 80 processes running every time you run Windows, and you could modify any of them to do something malicious in addition to whatever they're doing. The sticky keys attack, if you hit shift like 5 times, it decides you must be handicapped and offers the special handicap keyboard. And this is not used very often by normal real people, but it's often used by malware people. It's a good place to put something to automatically launch, because all you have to do is replace that file that runs the special keyboard with something else, and you can launch it that way. And then, of course, there's companion Trojans. Since dills are loaded, and they frequently don't specify what folder to load them from, it hunts for the dill through folders. So if you put a dill with the expected name in an unexpected location, it might load it instead of the real dill, and now you've been able to inject library code into a process. So that's the game. And we talked about this. The startup folder is actually pretty hard to find. Back in the days of Windows XP, you could just right-click and explore the start button and find it. Now it is ridiculously down in the menus, but you know, it's still there. If you put anything in there, we used to have machines up there that people would fill the C drive. And I would go delete their virtual machines, and that would put a notepad file in this location. And every time they booted up this file, would go, I deleted your stuff. Anyway, so, this was how you get a system on a Windows XP Home Edition machine. It was really awesome. All you had to do was log in with a non-administrator account, go to the command prompt and type at 2 p.m. run CMD, and it would open a shell as system at that time. All the scheduled tasks ran as system. That was bloody awesome. They patched that in Service Pack 1, but it was good, clean fun for a while. So the at schedules things in the future, and scheduled task is the GUI, or you can also do it from the command line with that. This is how you schedule cron jobs on Windows, things that will happen at later times. And each one of them is a job file in the tasks folder recording all the jobs. And these things really work. I made my own version of NetLab years ago. I got some transgender practice tests and put them on a shared server. And I wanted to have a login system for students, so I made a page with ASP where you could just record your password. They would put your password in a table, and it would change the password of the one account every hour. I made 365 times 24 cron jobs in scheduled tasks. So every hour, it would change the password to another entry, and it worked. It was bloody awesome. Anyway, you can modify any binary. These binaries, a bunch of them automatically launch, so you can just add malicious code, and then you can timestamp them, like that forensic I was talking about last night. Timestamping changes the times back to some earlier time, like a time you steal from Windows system files, so there's no evidence of modification. And that the signature will be wrong, and the MD5 will be wrong, but as we've seen in the projects, Microsoft signatures don't appear to be enforced. You can just take a Microsoft signed binary, modify it, the signature doesn't work, and it just keeps running like nothing's wrong. It's mighty weird, which I guess is why people pay for third-party stuff like LandDesk, because Microsoft security is very strange. Anyway, and then you got to modify it, hopefully so you don't break the actual functionality of the Windows binary. But in fact, there's all kinds of junk running in Windows that nobody cares about, like the multi-user pack. And you can, in fact, break a bunch of it and nobody would notice or care in most cases. So there's a Windows file protection exists, and then there's Windows resource protection in later versions, and it's getting harder and harder to do this. Just like I said, the old-fashioned rootkits don't work anymore. And you have to have bootkits instead, because Microsoft finally started enforcing a lot of permissions in the kernel. So you can't get away with as many of these dirty tricks in modern versions of Windows. Here's testc.exe is the thing that launches when you hit Shift 5 times, and you can just put anything there and it will just launch when you hit Shift 5 times. And you can do it before people log in, because it's so handicapped people can log in. So if you just open a command shell a system or something, then you're totally in. This is one of the many ways to do that. Anyway, even on remote desktop session, which is great, good, clean fun. All right, but they've supposedly fixed it in Vista, but there's another way to do it. By putting something in another long, complicated path, there is another version of it that supposedly still works. But Windows Defender can detect if you use that new technique. It looks for this. So if you're running Windows Defender, it will block the improved version of that attack. And I haven't heard of a later version. There probably is one, but anyway. That's the way it always is. The cops get bigger guns, so the crooks get bigger guns, so the cops get bigger guns. And that's how it goes. We talked about load order hijacking. I would hit this. All right. And since many Windows processes do not actually specify the full path to where to find a library, it hunts for the libraries by looking in your home folder and your documents folder and the root of C. And all you have to do is put a fake copy somewhere there, and it will load it instead of the real one. This is how Stuxnet worked. It had a DIL on the thumb drive that would load locally, which is full of malware. So that when you just pop up the window to see what's on the thumb drive, you're already owned. It was bloody awesome. Anyway, so here's Registry Editor showing all these DILs, and you can see it just has the name of the DIL that it has to load, and it doesn't have the whole path. So it will hunt for these DILs, hunting around in the system. And if you do the old thing, start run CMD that we all do, that doesn't even specify the file extension or the path. So it hunts through all these folders for cmd.bat, cmd.com, cmd.exe, and runs the first thing it finds that looks about right. So you can very easily, back in the days of XP anyway, put a fake CMD. When I tried it in Vista, it didn't work so well. So I think they're increasing the number of defenses. Anyway, here's the search order. So it starts where the application is loaded, then the working directory, then here, all over the place. So, you know, it doesn't go to the right place, which is probably system 32, until it's gone to a few wrong places first. All right, so it'll work when, if you put the DIL in known DILs, then it does store the full path in the registry, and it won't look any part stupid. It'll look in the right place the first time. But Microsoft doesn't really protect all their DILs with that. So anyway, that's the end of this. There's 12C3, which should be available somewhere in this ridiculous list. There it is. Neat. I want to get the Strandhog working on Android. That sounds awesome. It just came out last week and there's no official POC yet, but it sounds like it'd be pretty easy to do. So I'll be trying it out pretty soon. Strandhog is apparently a word for being annoyed by Vikings. An ancient Icelandic word. The people that discovered it 4 years ago named it after, I think they were Norwegian, and they named it after Vikings or something. Anyway, they told Google 4 years ago, and Google said, oh, that doesn't matter. And they didn't patch it. And now people are stealing banking information and everything with it. So I guess Google's going to have to care now. Nobody would do that, they said, yes. So, all right. Well, yeah. Anyway. All right, so which one requires pressing shift 5 times? That's sticky keys, good. All right, something like that keeps happening on my Mac. I keep fumbling around and then this irritating box pops up saying, you appear to be handicapped. And I'm like, oh, I wish I could just shut up. I've tried to type on this keyboard and it's hard. The keyboard is bouncy. Yet many people complain about this keyboard. I'm feeling that feeling myself.
So
Okay.
the same thing works on Macs now. So there's like this voice reader thing, and I forget the exact
dialogue reader or something.
It's like command like F5 or something.
Whatever it is, I hit it by accident several times a day.
It'll launch it even when the computer's locked in the background.
For the same reason, because you apparently can't type, so I guess you want to log into your voice or something.
It doesn't do anything in the background, but it still launches.
Yeah. And
Like, it doesn't help you do anything.
And I found a way to turn off one of there's this is junk. Enhanced dictation is one of them. A bunch of things keep popping up just because I'm a slob, and I keep trying to find some way to turn them off. Every time I buy a Mac, I spend the next month turning off all their new features. They're just in the damn way. I don't know why they pay people to develop this stuff when nobody wants it. Every Mac user I know learns how to turn off everything new so I can get some work done. It must be discouraging to work as a developer. Let's invent 10 new features that everybody will hate and have to turn off. Anyway, it's like what Gilbert does.
I just feel bad for
Apple Maps?
Apple Maps, yeah.
Where's an Apple Navigator I used?
Apple Maps?
Well, you know,
no one liked that ever.
well, you know what was funny was the Microsoft Map. Yeah. I like the Navigator. Anyway, let me do one of these. And, all right, which one does WIP prevent? Windows Resource Protection prevents you from modifying system binaries. All right. And which one uses app data? Oh boy. Oh, okay. I guess I do know this one. Right? Okay, that's startup folders. You're now in the app data folder just to keep you good and confused. All right. And which one produces job files? Okay, recurring tasks. That's what they are. All right. So, Caitlin.dill. Well, I can tell who that is. Anton is also a name I can identify. And this is another name I know. Each. I know who people are. It's bloody awesome. Okay, good. So that's enough of that. And so I think this is pretty much it. I think all we got is like one more class, and I think it's just like to be determined. Let's see what's, well, there's actually like some information about the Mac. So I'll probably talk about that, I suppose. My ARM exploits are giving me a lot of trouble. So anyway, so next week I'll talk a bit about the Mac, and that'll be it. After that comes final exam week. It's just online with the other Kahoots. So if you need extra credit, you can do something like Learn Go or something. There's a ton of that, or Juice One. There's plenty of ways to get a pile of points. If you put everything off until now, you can in fact still succeed by just doing a bunch of this extra credit stuff. So that's cool. None of the extra credit stuff is late until after the last day of class, and even until the finals week, we'll still take it. We just take some points off for being late. So if you do 300 points worth of Go, you could probably dig yourself out of a big hole anyway. But if you've been working all along, you probably already have an A. In Canvas, there's a chart in the announcements that says how many points it takes to get a grade, and a bunch of people already have an A, and they don't even need to take the final, which is perfectly fine. Anyway, any questions about anything? Yeah.
If you take the final and don't do well, will your grade come down?
It can only add to your grade. Okay. So if you get 0 points, you're where you were. Okay. That's perfectly fine to take the final if you don't need to, and it won't hurt you. Yep. If you get fun out of taking a final, it's not a very popular activity in my experience, but there are a few people who have, like, you know, a sense of thoroughness where they want to take the final. Anyway, there's no cert exam for this stuff, which is kind of too bad. There ought to be. But anyway, one of these days there'll probably be an IR cert. I think there's one in Sanj or GIAC or something, but there's not a common popular one. It would be not, that would be the thing we're taking, be some kind of cert exam and get an IR cert. I bet CompTIA will have one pretty soon, but they haven't got one yet. Anyway, all right, I'm going to stop the share. I'll stick around and see if anybody wants help here. Other than that, maybe we'll go over and see what they're doing, building robots in engineering or something. Oh, well, they ought to be in there racing for the competition.
They should be, but they're not.
Well,